from Balancing Mel, and obviously the Mel that needs the balancing. And today I want to talk to you about mental health. Now, in my YouTube trailer video, I did mention that mental health would be one of the topics. There would be very many topics that I'm covering on this channel, and it's because it's a lifestyle channel. It's my life, which I'm turning into an educational source and hopefully a community where we can all come together and, you know, have a chat about things. But for today, I'm going to chat to you about mental health, and let's debunk some myths as well at the same time. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, what does she know about mental health, and what gives her the right to talk about it? Now, I'm not a medical professional at all, far from it. And by all means, if you're a medical professional and you would like to comment on the content that is on this video, please do, and please share your personal experiences as well. If you are somebody suffering from mental illness, okay, so what puts me in a position to be able to talk about it is simple. It's knowledge comes from experience, you know. So I have major depression, I've got anxiety, I've got PTSD, and unofficially high functioning autism as well, though that one I don't see as an illness at all. Autism is going to be a whole different section on my channel because my son is also autistic. But for now, for mental health, the reason I feel that I can talk about this and bring this topic to you to open a discussion is the fact that I do have, I have very severe depression. I've got major depression, anxiety and PTSD, as I mentioned, and it got so bad in 2021, and I think a lot of it did have to do with, you know, the post-COVID stress. That could have been a contributing factor. But yeah, so it reached the point where I actually booked myself into a mental health care facility. It was only for 2 weeks. You obviously go through your courses during the day that they give you. You must, you know, go to cognitive behavior therapy courses and arts and crafts courses, which I loved. And then every day you see your psychologist and your psychiatrist. They were two amazing doctors. And yeah, they helped me get back onto my beaten path, you know, but this time equipped with knowledge and skills. So what set me off on that little path was my depression was spiraling badly, very, very, very badly. I love nature, absolutely love nature, and I saw a tree on the side of the road, and the fact that I love nature and this beautiful tree didn't move me at all, that had me crying for about 3 hours. Then Michael Collins, the astronaut from the Apollo 11 missions, he died, and I cried so hard that my colleagues were worried because they thought somebody that I know died. Because I was crying so hard because Michael Collins died, and on the Apollo 11 mission, he was in the command module that had to circle or orbit around the moon, and he wasn't able to go and walk on the moon with Buzz and Neil, you know. So trust me, it's as funny as it sounds. It's still an office joke, but at that point, to me, it was like this major thing. So yeah, my depression really was spiraling out of control at that point, and I didn't know at that point that what it is that triggered me, because I know I have depression. I've been taking antidepressants for years, but I never actually knew what my triggers were. And though there's more than one, there was something that set me off on this path at that time. And as I say, I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, post-COVID stress, stressing about COVID, stressing about will we have work, all of those things had a contributing factor. But so the aha moment was when I was driving home one afternoon, back then I had a little Quid, and you know, the Quid is a little car, and there was this huge truck driving next to me, and I was looking at this truck thinking, how do I need to get in front of you so that you can just drive over me? And I mean, we're driving at 120 kilometers an hour, so it'll be quick and clean. I mean, it'll be messy, but it, you know, from my perspective, it'll be quick and clean. Done. And I started accelerating to get in front of the truck so I can swerve in front of the truck. And at that last second, I realized, what are you doing? And I had to pull back over to the side of the road. I pull over on the side of the road and just think, what the fuck do you do? You've got kids. You can't leave them motherless and parentless, because I am a single mom. You know, there are no dads involved. I can't do that to my children. And that is, I think, the only thing that actually managed to pull me back at that point was my love for these two little boys that I have. I think that is what saved me. And you know, though I have my good days and my bad days, and oftentimes, you know, the little one is turning 7 in a few days, and the oldest one turned 11 this year. We have our fights. They're boys. You can go over to the parenting part of this channel for that discussion. But I love them more than anything in this world, and I realized that for me to take my own life would be the most selfish thing I could do, and the most horrible thing that I could do to them, because I cannot leave them alone in the world. They need their mom, and I am. They are what I needed. They are what saved me and continue to save me every single day. When I get to a dark place, that's what brings me back to the light again, is those two little boys. So my platforms that I'm using at this point is Instagram and obviously YouTube, and then a little bit on TikTok. But I want my channels to be informative. I want it to be a place where people can come and learn, and where we can actually interact with each other, open a conversation around mental health, open a conversation around single parenting, have a conversation about what's the best serum to use on the self-care channel, you know, or it's a whole lifestyle, and everything in life has its parts. So I don't know if this is making sense, if I'm just rambling now because I'm nervous. The first video I did was a makeup tutorial, purely because I wasn't sure if I could manage a topic like this on my first video, and I'm still getting used to, you know, filming myself and looking at myself at the same time, and then I have to go and edit this look at myself. Now I'm just rambling. So yeah, I just want this to be a place for us to be able to talk without fear of judgment. If somebody makes a comment in here that's negative, please leave, because I have zero tolerance for that nonsense, and I'm not going to stand by while you are breaking down another person on my channel's feed. So let that just be out there as well. So worldwide, there are very many awareness campaigns surrounding mental health and mental health awareness, but there are still very many stigmas attached to mental health, and people they have a lot of misconceptions, and that is something we'll cover. But if we don't talk about mental health, then those stigmas will remain forever. The only way we can get mental health as a acceptable topic of conversation is by talking about it. We need to break down the stigmas, we need to break down the misconceptions, we need to break down the walls that separate us from the others and the others from the us, and we really need to be more open about what it is that is going on inside, I think. Because, you know, if you don't talk about it, nobody knows. Nobody knows that you are suffering. Nobody knows that you are spiraling. And that is exactly what happened to me. I didn't have anybody to talk to. Those that I did try to talk to didn't understand. And I ended up just spiraling completely and out of control. And, you know, if you don't talk about it, as I say, nobody will know to be there for you, to help you. And more importantly, there might be somebody listening. There might be a pair of ears listening that desperately needs to hear what you are saying, because they're going through the same thing. And there's nobody there to tell them that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel like it's the end of the world. This is a little bit of a dark and deep topic, but I want to just break it down a little more. So what I'm going to cover in this video is we're going to look at the definitions around mental health, what mental health is and what causes mental health, and then we're going to look at how mental health is diagnosed and treated, and how it's on a spectrum, and how everyone is actually falling on that spectrum. And then also we'll look at a few common misconceptions around mental health and signs to look out for. What is mental health and what is its significance in our lives? Now, I need to read this to you. So, according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well, work well, and contribute to their community. It is an integral component of health and well-being that underpins our individual and collective abilities to make decisions, build relationships, and shape the world we live in. Mental health is a basic human right and is crucial to personal, community, and socio-economic development. Now comes my favorite part. Mental health is more than the absence of mental disorders. Huh? It exists on a complex continuum which is experienced differently from one person to the next, with varying degrees of difficulty and distresses, and potentially very different social and clinical outcomes. Okay, that part makes sense. Okay, now let's unpack that. So for those of us who have depression, that's not an explanation, not even remotely. So I can contribute to society, I can deal with life stresses, and all the while inside spiraling out of control. It's just a fact. You learn how to cope. You learn how to mask very quickly, because people are not, they don't like that negativity. They don't like mental illness. And it's mostly because they don't understand it. It's not a discrimination thing. It's because they don't understand it. And if we don't talk about it and educate them, then they will never understand it. But you know what? We laugh and we pretend to have a good time, even when inside we have this soul-crushing emptiness. But you think we're having a blast. We learn to hide it. We mask. So I dare to argue with the WHO that there's no absence of mental health. Is not an absence of mental illness. Mental health is finding a balance on how to deal with your mental illness and how to cope with it daily, how to live life with mental illness. Mental health affects everyone at some point. And for those that seek treatment and need treatment, no two treatments are the same, because you cannot box mental health in a fashion like that. You cannot say, this is mental health, here's its little box, and that's it. This is the bullet points, checklist, go, go, go. No, it's not how it works. It is on a spectrum. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the video as well. But, you know, some people have debilitating depression, but they still manage to go through life and contribute to society. And it's purely because they don't have a choice. And sometimes it's because they don't have anybody to tell them that it's okay to feel the way they do, and to tell them that they're not alone. So, okay, let's go on to the CDC. Okay, so now the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, they have this to say. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from child and adolescence and through adulthood. Okay, again, beautifully wrapped, but in a clinical fashion. But to get to the health part of mental health, yeah, that's a journey, guys. That's a lot of ups, a lot of lows. It's up and down, the highs and the lows. You know, you have your good days, you have your bad days. And when that bad day comes, it comes hard. It hits hard, you know. It's not there to play. And when you have your good days, they are really, really good. But you have to try and find your balance and learn how to keep a handle on it. Learn how to cope with it. Okay, so for mental health to exist, it has to be the solution for something. And that something is mental illness. And it is something that affects your thoughts, your moods, your behavior, your decisions, the way that you perceive the world and the way that you think the world perceives you. Mental health really, it can pull a doozy on you. So this is what the research says. Mental health is generally grouped as mood disorders. So that's things like depression and bipolar disorder and so on. Anxiety disorders, personality disorders, psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, eating disorders, trauma-related disorders like PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome, or stress disorder, sorry, and substance abuse disorders. So I will be unpacking a lot of these topics in different videos so that there's a bit of a video series, and that the videos don't become too long and, you know, drawn out, and then eventually you're just not going to learn anything. You're just going to go there. I don't have personal experience with all of them, so a lot of it will purely be research based, but where I do have personal experience, I will obviously add my knowledge or experiences to the content that I'm serving, or to the content that I am creating for you. And yeah, as I say, if you're a mental health care professional and you want to give some input, I would value that really greatly. And if you want to share your personal experiences, by all means, drop in the comments and let's talk. Let's open the community up, so that it's available for everybody, so that everybody can feel that this is a safe place to talk without fear of being judged, or, you know, people not understanding, anything like that. So let's take a look at what causes mental illness. Now, the short answer is nobody knows. It's a complex mix of things that could include social learning, trauma, genetics, your social group. I mean, for instance, with drug abuse, your social group could contribute to you ending up there. And then your culture and your life experience and things like that, that could also have, you know, a role to play in. It can also be impacted by how your brain works. So, you know, brain trauma could bring on a mental illness. And then, you know, we all know about, you know, chemical imbalances in the brain or whatever that causing mental illnesses. So some of the factors that could cause, there are genetic factors. So if a family member has a mental disorder, it doesn't mean that you will have a mental disorder. It just means that the possibility is there genetically, that you are predisposed to having or developing a mental disorder, though most mental disorders do present themselves, in the teen years mostly. So drug and alcohol abuse is another thing that could bring on or worsen a mental disorder or a mental illness. Illegal drugs could trigger a manic episode or psychosis or paranoia. Then there are other biological factors, some medications, some medical conditions, hormonal changes, things like that could actually bring on mental health disorders or worsen some in some cases. Okay, so early life environment. This is a difficult one. Children who are subject to abuse or neglect, as they are prone to develop mental health illnesses as they grow older. Trauma and stress. So in adulthood, as you know, there's so many traumatic things that can happen to you in your life. The death of a loved one, disease, our social isolation like we had during the COVID pandemic, soldiers in war zones. All of these things can contribute, cause and contribute to worsening PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, domestic violence, relationship breakdowns. It's things like that. It's a lot of, there's a lot of things, a lot of external factors that can play a role in that. And then there's also personality factors. So some traits such as perfection or low self-esteem can increase the likelihood of developing depression and anxiety, for instance. So there are a lot of factors that play a role in causing mental illness, but sometimes there's no reason for it at all. Sometimes it's just something in your, I don't want to say in your DNA, because then we go back to it being a genetic thing. But sometimes it's just you, man. No, but in all seriousness, sometimes it's just the way the dice rolled, and they didn't roll in your favor. It's tragic, especially if you're a parent and you think that one day your children may suffer like that. It's very sad to think about it like that, but yeah, so there are things that could contribute to mental illness presenting itself, but there aren't always a solid explanation for why it happens. Okay, so next we want to look at how mental health is diagnosed. Mostly it's going to be diagnosed by talking to your doctor, and the doctor's going to ask you a lot of questions. So it would be helpful if you realize that something is going awry, that have a journal, jot down your feelings, so that when you get to the point where you go and see a doctor, you know you have something to give them, something to explain what you've been going through. It's also helpful to take a family member or somebody who's close to you, or a caretaker or something, with you to the doctor, because then they can give their view on how they have been experiencing as an outsider what you have been going through, and that will also help the doctor in diagnosing. There really aren't any tests like blood tests that you can do. Thyroid issues sometimes can present itself as depression, so they would test to see if you have any thyroid issues, like an overactive or underactive thyroid, and if that's not the case, then they can rule out that is not a problem, that the depression is actually depression. But other than that, there really isn't much of anything that they can test for. It is a discussion between you and the doctor, and they use the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That is what they use to diagnose mental health or mental illness. That is and again, that's based on the information that you give your doctor, and if you take somebody with that they give your doctor. And from there, your doctor will refer you either for therapy with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or other specialized services, depending on what exactly the disorder is that they are picking up on. Now, going to your GP and asking for a referral to see a psychologist is always a good idea, especially if you're going through a tough time. Go see a psychologist. I promise you, therapy saves lives. If there's one thing you take away from this video, it's that sentence. That is at the core of it. The only way that you will ever be equipped with the information or the skills. Therapy saves lives. I can't say it enough, because it's just how it is. So how is mental illness treated? It is treatable, it's not curable. And this is again where I want to argue with the WHO, because you cannot cure depression. You cannot cure bipolar disorder. You cannot cure schizophrenia. Yes, you can keep it under control with medication, with therapies, but you cannot cure it. Therefore, there will never be an absence of mental disorders or mental illness. So again, I am not 100% on the same page as WHO on this one, but that's just my uninformed opinion, my formed uninformed opinion. The treatment for mental illness obviously will differ from person to person, and depending on what you have been diagnosed with. So an individual who has certain symptoms being diagnosed as having depression, their treatment will differ greatly from a person who has an eating disorder or a drug disorder or bipolar disorder or something like that. Some of mental illness's main treatments is things like psychological therapy. So that is things like support therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, which is CBT, NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. There is acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm not entirely sure what that one is. There's a lot of bullshit therapies about how you convince yourself that it's not real. I mean, that's just, yeah. And then obviously, there's couples and group and family therapies and whatever is needed for that. Then medicines can be used to treat mental illness. And there's also, there's a lot of people that's very much against it, but from my personal experience, it's what helped me. So, you know what, I drink my pills and I'll shut up. I just go on. So, for medication, there will be things like antidepressants for anxiety and depression, mood stabilizers for people with bipolar disorder, even for people with depression, antipsychotics for people who have psychosis or schizophrenia. Now, on the medication, I do want to just say one thing, and that is, if you feel your medicine doesn't work for you, do discuss this with your doctor, because it might be that it's the wrong dose or the wrong ingredient, or the ingredients are interacting with something else, or so just discuss with your doctor. If you feel like the medication is not working for you, do discuss this with your doctor so that he can get you on the right dose, on the right medication. Then there's also things in your lifestyle that you can adjust. Exercise is known to help ease anxiety and depression. I found out the hard way that exercise actually helps. So I started karate in January, and it was just a few months later, my sensei had to go to Japan for, I can't remember, I think it was a training camp or something, and it was 2 weeks that she wasn't here, that I didn't train. And obviously I didn't train at home because I'm lazy, so I started going into a little spiral again, but I did manage to pull myself out of it very quickly. And then obviously when Sensei came back, I started to train again, and I realized, okay, whoa, this is really actually, I mean, I've always heard, but I've never experienced it as such. So from personal experience, yes, exercise really does help. Then there's things like a healthy diet, having a good support system is one of the most important things. Not everybody has somebody to talk to though, and that is again why I want to open up a community where we can talk to each other. You know, there's nothing as horrible as going through a very, very dark period and knowing that you have nobody to talk to, that nobody understands what you're going through. And again, this is why I want a community where we can help each other. Okay, my background just started for coming down, so let's just hope it stays for the rest of the video. Okay, so apart from exercise and a healthy diet and a social support system, another thing is avoiding drugs and alcohol. Especially if you have issues within that. I mean, if you're an alcoholic, it's obviously you need to avoid alcohol. If you are a drug addict, avoid drugs. But also, like for me, I always listen to these stories about, people using, ayahuasca, which is a psychedelic like LSD. And that apparently helps them on their mental health journeys or whatever. But I am too scared to even try it because I don't know how that is going to affect me. I don't know how that's going to affect my mental health or if it might interact with my medication. So, you know what? If you are serious about your mental health, then stick to it. Don't mess up. Don't go and do drugs and drink yourself into a stupor, not knowing how it's going to affect you in the long term. Just look after yourself better. And then there's also complementary therapies like relaxation, meditation that you can try, and then obviously support groups, mental health facilities, rehabilitation centers. So these are all the ways that you can look after your mental health. As I said, it's treatable, but it's not necessarily curable. So be very careful with the expectations that you have going into treatment, because if you go into treatment expecting it to be a cure, you might be disappointed, which can just set the whole thing off into a different direction. So just know that it's treatments. It's not a cure, it's treatments. So the world divides us into groups. Those that have mental illness, those that don't have mental illness. And that is the biggest lie we can tell ourselves, because that is not only untrue, it is dangerous. It increases the stigma around mental health and people who suffer from mental illness. So, on a spectrum, you're going to have your extremes. So on this one end, you're going to have the severely negative symptoms, and on this end, you're going to have the severely positive symptoms. So it can be, you can be anywhere within that spectrum, the good and the bad. So here's the middle. Let's go down, and we've got the extremes of each one. So, people who don't suffer mental illness, they generally will fall here between where the milder symptoms are, and those of us who do, we know the extremes. We know that extreme happiness, we know the extreme sadness, or we know the extremes. So we live in the extremes, but we do move through the mild from one extreme to the other, sometimes very fast, but sometimes slower. Whereas people who don't have mental illness, they just stick here to the milder symptoms, swinging left and right, and one day you're happy, one day you're calm and functioning, and the next day the world is crumbling down. That's what people with mental illness has to go through, whereas with people who don't, it's today I'm happy, tomorrow I'm happy, the day after tomorrow I'm happy, and oops, all of a sudden I'm just having a really crap day, you know. So you're still going through that spectrum, you know. So everybody actually has to look after their mental health. It's not just those that are diagnosed with mental illness. Mental health is for everybody. Okay, so let's look at some of the common misconceptions and stereotypes about mental health. So I think because historically there was such a lack of knowledge, that is what caused the stereotypes. If you say mental illness, then, you know, you get this image of straight jackets and padded rooms and lobotomies and shock therapy, and I don't know what else they did to those poor people, but, you know, they tortured them. They didn't treat them. They tortured them. So, you know, now they know they know better, you know. They don't leave their patients traumatized and disabled anymore. But there are still some myths that can definitely stem from there. But let's have a look here at some of the myths and the facts. Let's debunk some myths. Okay, so one of the myths are, if a person has a mental condition, it means they have low intelligence. Now, not only is this untrue, but it is bloody ridiculous, because some of the most intelligent people out there have a mental illness. So, like any other physical illness, mental illness can affect anyone, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your intelligence level, your income, your whatever. It's anybody can be affected. Next one is, you only need to take care of your mental health if you have a mental health condition. Now, this I just mentioned to you, that everybody needs to take steps to promote their mental well-being and to look after their mental health and make sure that they are in balance on that spectrum. So everybody can take steps and engage in healthy habits to optimize their mental health and even their physical health. So again, it comes to, you know, you exercise, you're looking after your physical body, but the mental benefits that you're receiving from, you know, all the feel good, happy hormones, and, you know, all those things, at the end of the day, it's something that actually just does help. And again, it's for those that have mental illness and for those who don't. Okay, so poor mental health is not a big issue for teenagers. They just have mood swings caused by hormonal fluctuations and act out due to a desire for attention. So yeah, teenagers do have mood swings. That's a fact of life. That's a fact like the sky is blue. But that doesn't mean that they don't also struggle with mental health disorders or mental health illnesses. I'm just going to read the statistics from here. 14% of the world's adolescents experience mental health problems. 14% is a lot. Globally, among those aged 10 to 15, suicide is the 5th most prevalent cause of death. And for adolescents aged 15 to 19, it is the 4th most common cause of death. And that is the scary statistic. Okay, so half of mental health conditions start by the age of 14. And I don't know if it is, you know, maybe if it has something to do with puberty and the hormonal changes that causes that, or that, you know, and this is again where I would really value if a medical professional is watching this, please drop a comment and tell us your side, tell us the facts that you know and the experiences that you know. But, you know, if I just had to have a half-assed guess here, I would wonder if it isn't because teenagers go through hormonal changes that it sort of like activates a dormant setting, or, you know. So yeah, that anyway, that's one of them. So the next one, a mental health condition is a sign of weakness. If the person were stronger, they would not have this condition. Now, this is one that makes me so mad. I am, according to everybody I know, not everybody, just 99% of them, I am one of the strongest people that they have met, emotionally, mentally, but I still have depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So mental health has nothing to do with being weak or lacking willpower or any of those things. It's not a condition that you choose to have or not have. It's something that you need to accept. You need to recognize the fact that you have this condition, or you have these symptoms, and going to a doctor and seeking help is one of the most courageous things that anyone can do. So no, mental health is not for the weak. It is, maybe it's for the strong, who knows. Adolescents who get good grades and have a lot of friends will not have mental health conditions because they have nothing to be depressed about. Again. Okay, so depression is a common mental health condition that can result from complex interaction of social and psychological and biological factors, as we discussed earlier. So, you know, while there's a lot of things at play, yes, teenagers can feel pressured, which can cause anxiety because of school grades and their parents' expectations. But they also can actually experience depression and anxiety for reasons that's not identifiable. I know of people who come out of a perfect childhood, who had perfect grades and loving parents, a loving home, good family relationships, and they have some of the most debilitating depression I've ever seen. So, you know, you really can't judge on if a person is successful, they've got nothing to be depressed about. You have absolutely no idea what goes on in that person's mind, what goes on in their lives. There are too many factors at play to make assumptions like that. So the next one, bad parenting causes mental conditions in adolescents. Sure. So let's look at the factors that may influence mental health. Things like poverty, unemployment, exposure to violence, moving around a lot. You know, there are things like that is part of a child's life. It is not the parent's fault at all, but those are things that could result in that child having a mental illness later on in life due to trauma, or, you know, trauma that they went through and you didn't know that they were going through that trauma. So you as a parent, you are not to blame. Please, at this point in the junction, let's just stop here for a moment and focus on parenting for a moment. You are not to blame, unless you are the parent that is to blame, the parent that beats the child or does worse things to your child. Then yes, very much you are the person to blame. But if you are a loving parent and all you have ever done is make sure that you are giving your children a good home and a good life, full of love, full of happiness, then you are not to blame for any mental illness that child may develop as an adult or as an adolescent. Because again, there's many contributing factors. It's not based on parenting, because trust me, if mental health was based on parenting, I would not have depression. My mother is a very good mother and has always been, and she has always done her best for me and my sister, just as I try to do my best for my boys. So it really has nothing to do with parenting at all. Then we've got people with mental illness are crazy. Sometimes, yes. But, you know, saying that somebody is insane or crazy or cuckoo or, you know, whatever, it kind of hurts, you know. And it sort of just perpetuates that stereotypical stigma of mental illness. You know, it's like now we're just moving backwards instead of forwards. So people have this idea that mental health is wild and uncontrollable, and again, it falls on a spectrum. You're at different points of that spectrum every day. These terms are often associated with, you know, psychotic symptoms, like hallucinations or delusions or paranoia, or, you know, and these are symptoms that tend to present in certain mental health illnesses, not in all of them. So, you know, if somebody has mental health problems, or if somebody has a mental health illness, you can't go calling them crazy. I mean, okay, I call myself crazy because I'm just loopy as fuck. But no, seriously. So you can't just go around calling people crazy or insane or loopy or cuckoo or whatever the hell the current phrase is. You know, so symptoms can range from the severe to the mild and back to the severe and up and down, and there we go. A lot of those symptoms are associated with psychotic symptoms, which are things like hallucinations and paranoia and delusions. And, you know, not all mental health disorders are the same. Not all present with the same symptoms. So calling people crazy, calling them insane is really counterproductive, because you are stigmatizing again. You are putting a stigma, you're putting a label on something that should not have a label. And again, this just brings the fact that people are uneducated about what mental health is and what mental illness is back to the forefront, and really puts the spotlight on it, and shows us why people really need to, you know, be more educated. Okay, so another one is mental illness and health disorders are extremely rare. No, it's not. Mental illness is a lot more common than you think. Psychotic disorders, for instance, yes, that is rare. Things like schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder, things like that, that is rare. But mental illness as an umbrella term that covers all these things, the mood disorders, the personality disorders, eating disorders, all of those things, that is a lot more common than you think. 1 in 4 people worldwide actually suffers from a mental illness of some kind. And more than 55% of adults that do suffer from a mental illness, they don't seek treatment. They just end up a different statistic. So here's also some interesting statistics that I found. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of anxiety and depressive disorders grew, which we obviously knew, but the percentages is quite high. So depressive symptoms grew from a base of about 193 million people worldwide to 246 million people worldwide, which is a 28% increase. And anxiety disorders grew from 298 million people affected to 374 million people. So that's a 25% increase, and that's pretty bad. That's pretty hectic if you think about it. Okay, so here's one that I also think stems from a lot of a lack of knowledge, basically. So mental illness makes people violent. Some people can be violent, depending on the disorder, depending on the person. You know, if you think about schizophrenia and people with psychotic disorders, you know, they especially have a reputation for being violent. People with major mental disorders are believed to be responsible for only 4.3% of violence in a given community, and people with schizophrenia are 14 times more likely to be the victim instead of the perpetrator. So this is also another myth that we really need to educate people on, and get that one off the menu. Okay, so there's another one. People with mental illness cannot function in society. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, you mask, you go on. There are some people who have debilitating disorders that cannot function in society, and they are, in facilities where they are being looked after. But not everybody who has mental illness is somebody that can't function in society. So contrary to the stereotype, not all people with mental health disorders are homeless and locked away and, in a facility. So many of us hold jobs and have lives, productive lives. We have children, we have busy lives, we have YouTube channels, so yeah, that one's got to go. You cannot get better if you have mental illness. Now, this is again back to the point of it is treatable, it's not curable. So I think this is where this myth is a little bit of it gets things messed up a little, or twisted up a little. So there are chronic mental disorders and illnesses. So I mean, schizophrenia, for instance, I don't think that is something that can be cured. Personally, for me, depression, I don't see that can be cured. PTSD, anxiety, I don't know. From my perspective, it's not something that can be cured. It is something that can be treated, maintained, have in a balance. But I don't see that is something that can just go away overnight, or through a few years of therapy, now all of a sudden you don't have depression. You're going to have depression for life. It's how you treat that depression and how you look after yourself. That is what makes a difference. Okay, here's another fun one. Treatment is scary. Yes, it absolutely was. Then, way back then, but we wasn't up. So they don't do things like shock therapy and straight jackets and padded rooms and lobotomies and hands full of pills, leaving patients walking around the gardens like zombies, and that doesn't happen anymore. And those people mostly were there against their will. Now, these days treatment usually consists of a combination of mental health therapy methods, like psychotherapy and medication, and where it's necessary. And the people that are in mental health care facilities are actually there voluntarily. So my camera fell over, and I don't know if it's in the same position as it was before, so just deal with it, okay? I don't think it was. I think this is a better angle. I should have started with this one. Okay, so signs to look out for. It's important to look out for certain signs, with your friends, your loved ones, and especially your children. You want to know what to look for so that you can help them get the treatment that they deserve. So some of the symptoms that may indicate a possibility of mental illness, but doesn't necessarily, includes unusual or illogical thoughts, unreasonable anger or irritability, poor concentration and memory, not being able to follow a conversation, hearing voices that nobody else can hear, increased or decreased sleeping patterns, increased or low appetite, and a preoccupation with control over food and calories, or increased and excessive exercise. That may obviously allude to a eating disorder, lack of motivation, withdrawing from people, drug use, feeling that life is not worth living and having suicidal thoughts, becoming obsessed with a topic like death or religion, not looking after their personal hygiene, or their other responsibilities, and not doing as well as they used to at work or school. So you are concerned that you are experiencing a mental illness, please make an appointment to see your doctor as soon as possible. Make a list of everything that you believe is a symptom, and discuss this with your doctor, so that if you are undiagnosed and suffering a mental illness, you can get the treatment that you deserve and the treatment that you need. So seeing your doctor is the first step to getting treated and returning to good health. Okay, so how can I balance mental health? Your mental health can be boosted by positive thinking, and this again goes to the cognitive behavior therapy and the neuro-linguistic programming. And I can't remember that other one, but there was another one that they specifically use for autism, which is, it's again like just bullshitting your brain into thinking something else. So they say you can balance your mental health by having a support. Okay, obviously having a support from your family is a big thing. Your friends, your community, if you have a support system in place, then that does help a lot. Having a strong sense of identity and culture, that also makes a lot of sense to me. So you need to know who you are, and that can ground you. That is something that can bring you back to, but this is who I am, this is what I believe. And having a healthy body, eating a balanced diet, and exercising. Again, we've discussed how exercise and diet plays into your mental health. And then reducing stress where possible. I know it's not always possible, and sometimes it just becomes worse. But you need to learn how to deal with it in a balanced way. Developing adaptive ways of coping with life's problems. So again, there you will have to learn some coping mechanisms. That is something we can unpack in a future video. And then get the support you need. So at the end of the day, if you are going through a bad time, let's just say a bad time, it could be that you feel depressed. Feeling depressed and having depression is two different things. Just remember that. But a mental health illness can become more problematic at any given point. As I said in my makeup tutorial, I'm turning 40 now, and my history with mental health illness was, in retrospect, is a long way coming. But where it started getting treated was I would have irrational anger, and my GP put me on antidepressants, and I was fine for years, and until 2021, when it just went into a complete and utter spiral. And so in 2021, I think that is when it worsened. That's when it became worse. So I've lived with it my whole life. I've been treated as somebody with depression for very many years. And then all of a sudden, 2021 came and I just lost it. So, at that age, what was that, like 2 years ago? So I was 38. All of a sudden, life just went like down with you. And I went down, man. I really went down. So when you feel that happening, get help. Therapy saves lives. Speak to someone. Speak to your doctor. If you are a religious person, speak to your minister, your pastor, or whatever. Speak to a friend. Speak to a colleague. Speak to your boss. Find someone that'll listen. Just speak to someone. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. This is, you see why I'm breaking the videos up in topics rather, because otherwise it's just going to be too much information. We're going to sit here for 3 hours. So to conclude, mental health is a delicate balance, and you need to look after it. If you don't look after it, it's going to tip over. Okay, so we need to understand it. We need to understand our mental illness, and we need to raise awareness around that, and educate people to make sure that everybody knows the facts not the myths. And again, we need to talk about it, not just for ourselves, not just to educate, but also because you never know when somebody is listening that might need your help, that might need to hear that which you just had to say. And that is why I unapologetically talk about it. I will be me, and that's that. End of discussion. I'm not afraid to talk about my mental health, and I'm not afraid to say to people, or to tell people how I feel about, or how I felt during that time that I spiraled. Because I learned a lot of valuable lessons. I think I had to go through that to become the me that I am now. Because if I didn't, I might have ended up on a different path. Positive or negative, I don't know. I can't tell you. But I do think I needed to go through that experience to become the me that I am today, and to be the me that is sitting here now talking openly about it to my phone, but hopefully to an audience that's listening. And if I help one person, then that is mission achieved, mission accomplished. You know what I mean. Anyway, it was lovely talking to you, and I will see you in the next video.